Luffy has two prominent scars on his body, but did you know he has hundreds of others that aren't even visible? Today I'm going over all of Luffy's scars as well as the other Straw Hat pirates, so stay tuned until the end to find out where Luffy got all of these injuries from. I'm going to start with the one guy who might have more scars than Luffy, Zoro. Zoro suffers major injuries in nearly every battle and seems to never be healed. He would win one fight, and then the next battle would happen before he was even fully recovered. The first major scar that we see Zoro get that affects him arguably the most in the entire series is at the Baratier when he fought Mihawk. Mihawk injures Zoro so badly, he basically does everything to him but kill him. Firstly, in their fight, we had the butter knife stab straight into Zoro's chest. It looked like it might have stabbed him right in the heart, but I guess it missed it. And then the major one we all know about is the one right across his chest from his left shoulder to his hip. This all happened in episode 24, and the reason Zoro took the scar right across the chest is because he didn't want to turn his back and be defeated. If he was going to be defeated, he wanted to take the slash head on. This marked the beginning of Zoro's path to becoming the world's strongest swordsman. I would say this is Zoro's most iconic scar and probably the most meaningful to him as well, because it's a daily reminder what it takes to be the strongest and how bad he lost that day to the world's strongest at the time, Mihawk. Next is the scar covering his left eye. Now this one is still interesting because it's not confirmed how it happened. All we know is that it happened during the time skip because he came back missing an eye, and there's so many questions and theories revolving this eye that I actually made an entire video about them. So if you want to see that, the link is in the description. Zoro does have a couple other scars, and one of them are anime only. They're scars on his ankle. If you remember, he got trapped in Mr. 3's wax prison, and his solution to get out of it and continue fighting was to cut off his legs, and he actually did in fact dig his legs into his ankles at one point, and he has some scars there in the anime. And of course, there have been plenty of other injuries he's received that aren't visible anymore, like taking Luffy's pain. I mean, that's just probably the closest he's been to dying, and that was just all internal pain that he received. His first time using Demon Asura against Kaku, he took heavy damage in that battle, but there are no more visible wounds from there. Pretty cool moment showing his wounds though are when Arlong rips off his bandages in Arlong Park, and he's actually terrified of what he sees. Arlong is visibly shocked at how Zoro is even fighting with the scar and the injury he had from Mihawk. But those are all Zoro's visible injuries. Of course, he's taken others, like I said, against Kaku and also against Kaido and King. He received a ton of damage there, but nothing visible and long lasting. So let's move on to the next Straw Hat. We have Nami. Now, Nami doesn't have any visible scars like Zoro does, but her most significant mark is from Arlong, the old Arlong tattoo that she had. We saw she tried to like cut it off by stabbing herself or something, and then that's when Luffy stops her, and we get awesome help me moment. After Luffy defeats Arlong, she ends up getting it removed or replaced with a new one. And while it's not a scar by traditional methods, I think it kind of is emotionally, because that tattoo does hold like a deep traumatic weight on her shoulders. As for injuries, she's been wounded numerous times throughout the series, stabbed by Miss Doublefinger during Alabasta, electrocuted by Enel in Skypiea, and slashed by Khalifa in Eni's lobby, but none of these leave any long-lasting physical marks. Nami usually fights from a distance, so she's able to avoid these injuries and keep her beautiful face, so no scars for Nami. Now we have Usopp, and he has sustained his fair share of injuries throughout the anime, with his most iconic physical damage being his repeated broken nose. This happens in his fight with Luffy over the Going Merry, and then again in Eni's lobby, Soji King suffered the same fate. Weird how it happened to them both. We also see Usopp's entire body injured after his fight against Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas in Alabasta, but none of his injuries left any long-lasting marks somehow. After a swing of Mr. 4's bat, we can clearly see Usopp's skull crack. Somehow, it always returns to its original shape. I don't know how. Another major beating Usopp got was in Water 7 when the Franky family stole his money. They beat him up then, and then he tried to get it back, and they beat him up even worse the next time. So Usopp has suffered some pretty severe injuries, and while they haven't left any long-lasting scars, he still has probably suffered more injuries than most of the other crew members. I'll quickly touch on Franky and his injuries, because he's a Straw Hat that hasn't really received many injuries. When you're a cyborg, you don't get injured very much, and even if you do, you're able to repair it pretty easily. Actually, Franky's most severe injury came before joining the Straw Hats, when he tried to stop the sea train to prevent Tom's execution. He was hit head-on and left near death, leading him to rebuild his shattered body using scrap metal and technology. That's his worst injury. He got pretty beat up in his fight against Senor Pink, but still nothing like lasting and that is visible to this day. So Franky's had it pretty easy. A similar Straw Hat who doesn't have any visible scars is Robin, but she's endured some of the most brutal and self-sacrificial injuries in the series. One of her most significant moments comes during the Dressrosa arc, when she shields Rebecca from Diamante's attack. She uses her body as a human shield, and while protecting Rebecca, her back is sliced and bloody. In Innie's lobby, we see Robin restrained and beaten by Spondum, which kind of sucks because she was already going through a lot of emotional stuff there, and then Spondum just had to be Spondum and be all physical. Robin is also visibly injured in her fight against Black Maria. Maria uses her spider legs, spiked knuckles, and webs to beat down Robin while mocking her and her crew. At one point, Robin is struck multiple times, and we can clearly see blood on her face and body. But even after all of these terrible injuries, Robin is still squeaky clean when it comes to scars. Honestly, you gotta give a shout out to Chopper. I think a lot of the reason we don't see many of them with scars is because Chopper was there to heal them up and repair them correctly. So shout out to him. And speaking of Chopper, let's go ahead and talk about him and his injuries. He's another character that isn't often receiving battle wounds. Since he is a doctor, he's more so in like support roles during fights, not really in the action, actually hand-on-hand combat. Like in Wano, Chopper spent most of the time creating an antivirus to treat people. He does fight Queen for a little bit, but not for long. And the one time we see Chopper take some major damage is when he uses Monster Point for the first time in Annie's lobby. The transformation gave him immense power, but left him completely berserk, unable to distinguish friend from foe, and it took a massive toll on his body. Afterwards, he was unconscious and couldn't even walk. And that's pretty much it for Chopper. Sure, he gets bruised and scratched up, but everyone else does as well, and no major lasting injuries yet. Let's move on to Sanji. He has definitely seen his fair share of injuries over time, but his are different from everyone else. Sure, he has had some brutal beatings, but most of his scars aren't even from fighting. Sanji was scarred emotionally on Newkama Island, forced to run away for 2 years straight. The man was so scared that he even learned to walk through the sky at one point. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, he's one of the Straw Hats who's lost the most blood throughout their time in their battles, most of that blood being from nosebleeds whenever he thinks about beautiful women. Dare I even mention Fishman Island? But as for serious combat injuries, Sanji has taken some devastating blows in fights. In Indy's lobby against Jabra, he pushes his body to the absolute limit. By the end of that battle, he's covered in blood. In Whole Cake Island, he suffers emotionally and physically while being beaten by his brother Yonji, his father Judge, and emotionally by his entire family. Despite all of this, Sanji's body shows no visible scars, likely due to his durability and the fact that he's a fast, evasive fighter, so he doesn't get hit that much. And at this point, since we haven't seen Sanji take any scars, I doubt we do now because of his new body and his new enhancements after we saw in Wano. He unlocked his Vinsmoke genes and is now invincible pretty much, so I doubt he's able to get scarred. Next, let's touch on Jinbe. Jinbe is one of the toughest Straw Hats, and his body bears the proof. His most significant injury came during the Battle of Marineford, when he tried to protect a severely wounded Luffy from Akainu's magma fist. Jinbe took the full force of the attack to his torso, resulting in a massive burn wound that surprisingly didn't leave a scar. I think it should have, honestly, but the only reason it didn't is because it doesn't have the emotional trauma that Luffy's has, and plus maybe Oda just didn't want to draw the scar, I don't know. Despite taking all that damage, he still held on to Luffy and made it to Law to escape. Then later in the series, Jinbe stands up to Big Mom, and we don't really know what happened in that fight, but I'm sure he took some damage standing up for them, because remember, he stayed behind to allow Luffy to escape, so surely he got to fight a lot of people there, but when he comes back, he's not that injured, so he must have done okay. Jinbe also fought against Who's Who in Wano, but really didn't take a lot of injuries. I think Who's Who definitely felt the brunt of that fight. Like a few other Straw Hats, Jinbe doesn't really have any visible scars, but he's definitely taken some damage over his time in the show. Second to last, we got Brook. I figured I'd mention him, but look, he's a skeleton. He can't bleed or have scars. The one time we do see his bones crack, he drinks milk and they heal pretty much instantly, so there's not much to talk about here. Last but not least is Luffy. Luffy has endured more life-threatening injuries and scenarios than any other Straw Hats, and his body bears the price of that. His first scar, the small X-shaped one under his left eye, was actually self-inflicted as a child to prove his toughness to Shanks and his crew. It's a defining feature of his face and a symbol of his reckless courage even from a young age. But Luffy's most prominent scar is the X-shaped wound on his chest, which he received during the Battle of Marineford. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but as he was escaping with Jinbe, Admiral Akainu struck him with a magma punch intended to kill, and Luffy was severely burned. This scar remains clearly visible post-time skip and is a constant reminder of the loss he suffered during that war, especially the death of his brother Ace. Beyond just the scars, Luffy has survived some of the most brutal beatings. During his first battle against Lucci in Eni's lobby, he pushed himself to the absolute limits. At Impel Down, he's poisoned by Magellan and nearly dies. The only reason he survived was from Ivankov's hormone injections, which took 20 years off his life. And then in Whole Cake Island, he gets destroyed by Katakuri and took a spear straight through the side of his torso. I'm surprised that didn't leave a scar, to be honest with you. And there's plenty I'm not even mentioning here, but some of his worst ones came in his battle against Kaido. Kaido defeats Luffy with a single Thunder Bagua, knocking him out cold. In their rematches, Luffy endures countless crushing blows and even falls off Onigashima after being knocked unconscious. But what makes Luffy different from a lot of people is that despite all of this punishment, he just gets back up again and again and again. And the culmination of all of these scars and injuries that Luffy took ended up allowing him to unlock and awaken his Devil Fruit, which gave him his Gear 5 capabilities. Those are all the Straw Hat's scars and worst injuries explained. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like.